Introducing NASM 1, NASM's ultimate membership program, where the NASM community helps each other build incredible careers, transforming the lives of the clients we inspire and supporting each other as we grow and succeed. NASM 1 is best-in-class tools, cutting-edge certifications, confidence in your craft, and everything you do as a personal trainer made easy.
You're listening to the Peak Physique Podcast with Andre Adams on the NASM Podcast Network.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Peak Physique Podcast. I'm your host, Andre Adams, IFBB Pro, Olympian Physique Athlete, and of course, I'm also an NASM Master Trainer. Today, we have a very special guest. I'm so excited for her to join us. And, let's play a little guessing game. I'm going to rattle off some credentials and see if you guys can identify who it might be. We've got the reigning 2023 Miss International Arnold Classic Wellness Champ. She's a top Olympian in the sport of bodybuilding and the wellness division. She's also an entrepreneur, and believe it or not, she's enrolled in the NASM PBC course. More importantly, she's one of my good friends, Miss Kass Gillis. Welcome, Kass.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking time out of your day, your week. I know it's a little hectic and chaotic heading into the Olympia. You're very close right now. So how's your energy for the people that aren't familiar with what we do heading into a big show?
Energy right now is it's pretty low. Some days it's lower than others, but we're 11 days out now, I believe. So
yep. It's the home stretch.
Yeah.
So it's the home stretch. But the good news is you've been there many times before. I've been there many times before, and I know you're going to handle it like a champ, like you always do. On this episode, guys, if you're just tuning in, Kass and I are going to break down some really good topics that I want to share with you all today about being an elite competitor at the top of the sport, and how do you balance that with, home life, maybe it's work balance and family and all the other good stuff that you have going on in your daily life. I also want to talk about the mindset that it takes to compete at a high level for long periods of time, and then how can some of those same attributes that make us successful in the sport carry over into other aspects of your life. Let's dive in, Kass. We'll go through some Q&A. I want to hear a little bit. I know your story, but I don't think a lot of our audience quite knows your story yet. Let's take it all the way back to the beginning, where you first started. And, I believe it was around the time your son was born, you decided to, get serious about training and ultimately compete. Maybe walk us through what your mindset was like and what drove you to start competing, more than just going through like a transformation.
I think I had always really admired the way people looked on stage. I kind of thought it was impossible to get there. And just the idea of competing itself just seems so crazy that I kind of like to do things that push my comfort zones. And yeah, I gave it a try, and it's gone well since, I guess.
Yeah, you kind of did some cool things so far. It's going kind of well for you. I would say it's going pretty incredible. How many shows did it take you to get your pro card? And let's tell the audience too what division you actually turned pro in.
So I did 2 regional shows, 1 national show, and then I went to a pro qualifier and got my pro card in figure.
Yeah, so that was a pretty fast journey. And for you guys that aren't familiar with the sport, that's hard to do, right? Where you come in and you kind of just qualify for nationals, and then really honed your skills more so on the pro stage, I believe, at the pro level. I had a similar path, it was about 5 months for me. I did like 2 NPC shows and then 2 to 3 national shows right back to back and got the pro card. And sometimes it almost forces you to level up, because now you're up against elite competition instead of spinning your wheels for a couple years at the regional level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that's a good segue too. I want to talk about when you got that pro card in figure, and, figure being a more balanced, proportion top to bottom division. right? You got to have a certain amount of muscularity, density, symmetry, and conditioning, versus wellness, where we have a very specialized criteria for you to be more overdeveloped in the lower body and the glutes. And what kind of led you down that path? First of all, was it an aesthetic thing? Did you just love that division to begin with? Or was it, your genetics?
So before the IFBB had the wellness division, I was following a few girls on Instagram who competed in the Elite Federation because they had wellness before. And it's kind of just the look that I fell in love with. Also seeing the training intensity of Vivi Winkler, just pushing her body past the limits. And it kind of made me realize that's what you have to do to grow your physique. As much as possible.
Yeah. Now, what changes happened there too, Kass? I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because, your training and your dieting and things probably changed, obviously, from figure, where you had a different split and you're doing, equal work up top and in the lower body, to I know where your training split's at now, right? And let's talk about that a little, like volume and frequencies on the lower body today.
So I had to completely stop training upper body. And then I also have to be careful about what muscles I'm engaging if they are more compound movements, I guess. Like I don't want to load up the squat rack and, do heavy squats. My upper body just grows really easily. So basically lots of isolation for my lower body, train it 3 to 4 times a week.
Right. So, and that can change right throughout the course of your prep. For you guys that are wondering maybe the science behind that, it's a little different than like a performance goal, right? If you're a power lifter and you don't really care about the aesthetics, we're trying to meet very specialized criteria to win bodybuilding competitions. So it's more of an aesthetic physique goal. And there's a couple principles that the NASM audience would definitely be familiar with, like SAID principle. It's specific adaptation to impose demand. So if we're putting the same, demand on the legs and glutes 3, 4, 5 times a week, and we're only putting, a very small amount of demand on the upper body, we're going to get a stronger adaptation in the lower body a little bit faster. And for you guys that are wondering, like, how can you leverage that for other physique goals? You can apply that to any lagging or deficient muscle group. Let's say for Kass, she might get feedback and say, hey, we need a little bit more upper outer glute or mid glute. So in her programming, we would then look at adjusting something like her volumes and frequency and intensity around those specific muscles. So we'll talk more about that. We actually had a question. I don't know, Kass, you might remember a good friend of mine back here from our boot camp. Her name is Jen, and I'm trying to push her to do a wellness competition, but she had a question for us from Instagram, and it was about acute variables. And what that means is, our timing, set volume, our rep ranges, like what things are working well for you on an average day. What are the rep ranges and maybe like set volumes that you normally train in?
I usually work in the 12 to 15 range. When it comes to hip thrusts and stuff like that, I do try to go heavier for as many reps as possible, but just not so heavy that my core is taking over too much or my lower back. I do like to switch it up though every month or so, the type of style I do. I remember I did have a lot of growth when my coach programmed German volume training, which is like 10 sets of 10 squats, or we did hack squats or leg press or something, and then only 1 to 2 sets of isolation exercises after. I had a lot of success with that type of programming, but I think whatever works for you to push yourself is a great way to train.
Yeah, I love that mentality, right? It's really finding that balance, and that can change for you over time. One thing that's worked well for myself as the athlete, and then also for athletes that I coach, is undulating periodization. So, this week we might be training in that 12 to 15, maybe even 20 rep range, maybe some more isolated, for us, it'd be like open kinetic chain movements. And then week 2 or 3, we might be in like a more heavy compound type of training phase with lower reps, heavier weights, 6 to 10 reps, where we're really pushing the intensity and trying to break down a little more muscle tissue. And what I love about that is it allows you to continue on in prep without plateauing. And those are just all different tools in your toolbox. Now, if you're training, for you guys that aren't familiar with it, some preps might be 8 weeks, some might be 20, depending on your starting point. And if you're getting really good results every week, you're making progress, the scale's moving the way it's supposed to, aesthetically, your body's responding the way it should. You don't always have to mix things up. Now, it's good practice, every 4 to 6 weeks or so, just to throw some variety in there, but there's other ways of accomplishing that. So that's always stuff we're excited to hear about for sure. For you guys that are just joining us, this is your boy, Andre Adams. You are on the Peak Physique Podcast, and I'm here with Miss International, my close friend, Kass Gillis. Kass, other things we should talk about, corrective exercise. You and I have had a few conversations on that, and this is where we got to get like surgical with training, right? Where you might have excellent training, you got an excellent physique, but we're now in that upper echelon, right? You're in that top 5 or so of the Olympia, and you're trying to get 1% better and meet very specific criteria from the judges. Do you think something like corrective exercise that allows you to isolate a specific muscle can be beneficial for, athletes at our level?
Yeah, for sure. For example, one of my glutes I have a hard time activating. So I remember you guys showing me a couple of things I could do to kind of get it fired up. So there's definitely a benefit of using corrective exercise for sure.
Yeah, no, I love it. In fact, I remember that, we had a good buddy of mine here, a soft tissue expert, Josh Bruning, and, we were talking about different techniques for Kass specifically to balance out some symmetry and maybe add, some refinement to her training. For yours, it was our overhead squat assessment. Actually, we noticed like the feet turn out, some, eversion and what we call pronation of the feet or flattening of the feet. And to correct that, we had her actually stand toes forward and then externally rotate the quad. So we call that like upper femoral rotation, right? External rotation to help engage her glutes and then help her just, activate the correct glute muscles as she's working through a squat. So those are things that a lot of people, I don't think they're necessarily thinking about. Most people are they're in the gym. I'm going to hop on that squat bar or a deadlift platform. I'm just going to move the weight. But for us, we got to get a little more surgical with it for sure. Other things that are fascinating to me, Kass, as a mom and, wife and all these things, what attributes or, things that you've learned from bodybuilding do you think have helped you in your personal life? Maybe it's discipline or confidence or accountability, whatever that looks like. What are some things that have helped you?
I mean, definitely confidence. Competing has drastically improved my confidence than what it used to be. What else? The discipline of meal prepping, being on schedule. It almost kind of balances things out because you're eating every 2 to 3 hours. So, you don't really have a choice but to be on point throughout the day. And then it kind of just becomes a lifestyle and a habit, and it carries over to other things that you do, I believe.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I 100% agree with that. It's all those little things that we learn there. And I talk about this all the time. If you can be a successful bodybuilder, there's no reason you can't apply that same mentality to work, right? Our relationships, marriages, things like that, parenting, and be successful there as well. So I think I've experienced the same thing over the years. I remember in the early days when I first started, mine was actually backwards. I was climbing the corporate ladder at the time, and I was super regimented about everything I did, very analytical, making sure that I follow a strict routine with everything I'm doing. And when I started bodybuilding, I remember at the time, the first time I qualified for the Mr. Olympia, and my boss at the time came and just had a conversation, and he wanted to compliment me on, he recognized, he was like, wow, I see the same disciplines and things that you're doing here at work. And he's like, it makes perfect sense because you're applying all that same logic to the sport of bodybuilding, right? That's why you're excelling over there. So I love just looking at, some parallels there with everyday life between bodybuilding. On that note, Kass, challenges. What are, things and advice maybe we can give our followers for any challenges or obstacles that you've overcome, like heading into a big show? Let's talk about one today, right? You had an issue, right? Son got sick and you're smack dead like 11 days out from the O. How do you balance it and how do you keep your sanity?
I don't. Just kidding, but
Yeah.
that's a tough one. I guess you're just kind of forced to deal. It's not easy. Luckily, I have a good support team of people that can help me, but it seems like this kind of stuff always happens at important times in my life. Like last year, I was very sick, 10 days out from the Olympia, and I ended up, placing well. So I think when things like this start to happen, it's kind of like maybe something good is coming my way.
Yeah. So it's like keeping yourself calm, right? You don't want to let the cortisol build up, because for you guys that don't know, cortisol is not your friend, right? It stores extracellular water, body fat. Peak week, it can make us, spill over and hold a lot of extra water. So we definitely want to keep those cortisol levels low. And to Kass's point, when something like this happens, I swear the universe just tests us, right? It's just automatic. You've got this big event. I always get sick before my big events. Like I'll get randomly, I'll get a head cold or something going into like a huge presentation. So, sometimes it happens, but, rule number one, don't panic. Rule number two, try to collect yourself, put one foot in front of the other, and just deal with what's right in front of you, right? For me, it's like I compartmentalize it. It's like blocking and tackling. I got to deal with this thing right here. I'm not even going to worry about this right now. And then, before you know it, you get through it. So definitely just finding those little ways to keep your sanity. And you hit on something very important for me, which is the support system. So that can be a game changer. I think you've probably noticed this too. Like sometimes we observe, right? We see friends or athletes that we coach and they don't have a good support system. And that can really make things 10 times more challenging when you're on prep. Yeah. So for your, support system, was it always there? Was it something that kind of, as the success started to happen, they kind of understood what you're doing and, what your goals are?
So in the beginning, it was mostly my husband. My family is also very supportive with helping out with my son if needed. But I have started to build a good solid circle of people around me that, have a special skill in certain areas. If that makes sense. Like you have someone that like helps with your posing, your mindset, your training, like everyone kind of does their part. And I'm just really excited to be going into the Olympia with the best team I've had so far. So
yeah, it does make it a lot easier for sure. You got to have those resources. I see people all the time talking about, how they're self-made and they got here, and nobody's self-made. Like everything we do, we have to have a support system to really excel at it. And I think that's important. So definitely for you guys that are just starting out, make sure you build up that team around you. Now, don't get me wrong, support system can backfire too, right? Sometimes you'll have people that are just gassing you up and, oh, you look amazing, you're phenomenal, right? You're going to kill it. For me, I got to block all that noise out when I'm on prep, because no matter how you look, if you feel like you've arrived, you feel like you've made it, you're not going to train as hard, right? You've already lost. So you got to like block out the noise, good or bad, and just focus on what you got to do.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah. So another thing we can talk about in terms of just training, we talked quite a bit on the physical side, but I want to talk about the mental side too. For me, there's that point in prep. I don't know. Sometimes it's like 4 weeks out. Sometimes it's 2 weeks out. I call it getting in the zone. And you're probably there right now, Kass. It's when everything's autonomous, right? Everything is on autopilot. I'm not even thinking about it. It's so routine and regimented at that point. I'm rolling out of bed. I'm automatically off on my fasted cardio before I'm even awake. And, my meals, I'm not thinking about them. I'm just getting them in, right? I'm drinking my water every day. And it's not even going through the motions. It's just that you're locked in, right? You're in the zone. Do you hit that point in your training, or do you feel like, all the way down till the show comes, like every day is a struggle?
I guess I do, depending on the prep. When it's back-to-back shows, it's kind of more of, it is a lifestyle, but for example, like what you're saying right now, I am walking in, it's the Olympia, but I've done quite a few shows, so it's kind of, sometimes you need to be creative and find different ways to, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, different ways to get laser focused, right? And you got to have tunnel vision. That's what I'm trying to tap into. What things help get you there? Is there for me, I'll be honest. You know what mine is, Cass? It's
But
fear. It's fear of like underperforming. It's fear of failure. It's fear of not living up to my own standards or disappointing my, people that look up to me. That's what drives me to do better and get in that zone where I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just doing the work because, right, I'm afraid of not succeeding. So I think it's important. People assume that, like, hey, you guys are Olympians, right? You're pros, like, it should be a breeze. Like, no, we get nervous before big shows. I do.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think fear is one for me too. I have my family and stuff. I'm supporting them, so it's a lot. People put so much time in with me that I don't want to let people down. So that's a big thing as well.
Yeah, exactly. Right. There's sponsors, there's everything on the line, and it's a lot. It can be a lot of pressure that you feel. So, Mike Tyson actually had a quote that I absolutely love. It talks about fear and anxiety, and the only difference between the coward and the hero is, because they both feel fear. The only difference is how they use the fear. Right. The coward runs away from it. The hero has the courage to face the fear and deal with it. And I always try to remember that, like, it's okay to feel that fear. It's energy. So channel that into your goals, right? You just got to do something with it. What are your big goals? I want to hear 2 or 3 big goals for Cass. And I want these to be like those big ones that scare you, right? Maybe it's an entrepreneurship, and we're going to talk about KG Jeans in a minute too. But maybe it's, obviously winning the Miss Olympia wellness, anything like that scares you. That's a huge goal of yours.
Sorry, I just have my son and my dogs running around.
No worries. We'll edit that out. I'm going to repeat the question. All right. So any big goals that scare you, right? Things that maybe in your personal life, entrepreneurship, business, it could be your competition goals, but what are some of those big ones that you don't talk about often because maybe maybe they sound silly to other people, but to you, they're big goals?
Goal of mine. It's something I'm not comfortable doing. I'm sure like a lot of people feel that way, but I guess being able to do that is a huge goal. Getting better at speeches, podcasts.
Yeah.
Another goal, obviously top 3 Olympia, retake my Arnold title, and come up with another business venture. Right now I have my jean company. I do a little bit of training, but I feel like you can never have too many, side hustles. So just kind of thinking of more ideas to start.
Yeah, thinking of different ways to connect the dots. So I'm so proud of you too. So I don't know if you guys saw this, but Kass and I were just out at Legion Sports with a good friend of mine, Chris Gillis. I've got some long-standing history at that show. Love that show. And we did a seminar there, KG Jeans booth, right? So we brought Kass's booth out, and I think the girls loved it. It looked like they had a blast. Everyone was trying on different jeans. So, definitely things like that will help you grow in other areas. And here's the thing about like innovative people is you've got to explore your own creativity, right? You've got to push to the point where you're comfortable being uncomfortable. And then, like you said, really just surrounding yourself with that support system that'll help get you there. One thing that I'll add to that too, Kass, because, there's always those big goals that scare you. It's funny now, if my goals today don't like scare the crap out of my family, I already know it's not big enough, right? So you followed long enough that you kind of know that, right? It's like buying a gym, launching a supplement company, buying a new house, whatever it is. But you got to have those big goals. One thing I want to ask for you too, especially in the beginning, did you ever feel an imposter syndrome? I get this question all the time, so I want to speak to it, but I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, all the time. Still to this day, I get imposter syndrome.
You're an imposter, Miss Wellness International.
I don't know. You just always feel like, am I good enough? Like, you know what I mean?
Right. Like, dude, you look at other people too that maybe you look up to, and it's like, well, a lot of times we feel like they're smarter than me, or they've, I'm not worthy. But here's the thing is you write your own story into existence. And the biggest thing, the best thing you guys can do if you're struggling with that is just take action, right? Everyone feels a little imposter syndrome. I don't care if you've, made it and you're a millionaire, whatever. You got to start somewhere. So you just be a sponge, a student of the game, learn as you go, explore that creativity, and I promise you, you will do great. So don't be afraid of the imposter syndrome. Good. I know we are getting to the end of this podcast episode. Sure, everyone knows where they can find it. You're going to be competing at Olympia, but after your competition, we also have a guest appearance for you guys that would like to come meet Kass. I think it's 2 p.m. Saturday on the 4th, which is just around the corner. So definitely, guys, make sure that you stop on out and, come with Kass. Like, we can even do some posing. We did that at Legions. But definitely make sure you come by and say hi. Kass, let's tell everyone where they can find you online.
My Instagram is KassGFit. My jeans page is KGJeans_. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right. And if you can't find her, you can just go to my page and I promise you will find her. So, Kass, we are wishing you all the best, sending all the energy and support your way. I already know you're going to do phenomenal. So we're all pumped and excited for you here at NASM. And you guys, make sure if you got value out of this episode, all we ask is that you share with at least one friend and be sure to like and subscribe. This is Andre Adams signing off of the Peak Physique Podcast. We'll see you next time.